Trump's tariff policies are destroying small businesses across North America, and the numbers prove it.
The doubt here.
Yeah, they really were, Bianna. And I will note, it was not just the base. It was the overall American public. And they have turned against tariffs the same way college football pundits have turned against Arch Manning after his performance in Columbus on Saturday. Look at this. New tariffs on imported goods. You go back to November of 2024. Look, the popular position was favor. They favored new tariffs on imported goods, 52%, 48% opposed. You go to this side of the ledger, look at that, the opposition up like a rocket. We're talking about 60% opposing new tariffs compared to just 40% who favored. So it was majority favor back when Trump was reelected in November of 2024. Now it's a clear 3 in 5 Americans oppose it. The Americans have gotten a taste of the tariffs and they spit it right out.
So is the taste paying more? I mean, because that's how economists have always described this, as actually a tax on consumers.
Yes, it's exactly right. Why is the opposition up like a rocket? Well, it all comes down to money out of the pocketbook, right? Impact of tariffs on prices. Look at this in the short term. 77% of Americans now agree they raise prices in the short term. Look at this itty bitty number at the bottom. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. When you can count it on your own hand, you know it's a small percentage. Just 4% of Americans believe that in the short term, tariffs decrease prices. Long term, look, this has long been the Donald Trump argument, right? That even if there's short-term pain, in the long term will pay off. Not according to Americans. Impact of tariffs on prices, even over the long term, look at that. 50% say increase, just 25%, just half the level, say decrease. And while 25% in this particular case is better than 4%, 25% is way less than 50% of Americans who say that, in fact, prices will increase over the long term.
Recent polling shows that 60% of Americans now oppose these tariffs, recognizing that they're driving up prices and crushing entrepreneurship. What started as a retirement hobby for Canadian woodworker Doris Kochanek has turned into what she calls an absolute nightmare, and she's not alone. Thousands of small business owners who built their livelihoods selling handmade goods to American customers are now facing extinction. For years, entrepreneurs like Kochanek enjoyed what seemed like a golden age of cross-border commerce. The de minimis rule allowed packages worth under $800 to enter the United States duty-free, making it incredibly easy for small sellers to reach American customers. Canadian Etsy vendors had built entire businesses around this system, with roughly 90% of their sales going to U.S. customers. The United States wasn't just a market, it was essentially an extension of their domestic OP, rations. Canadian businesses had enjoyed years of favorable trading conditions.
Okay, well, let's go to results. Right now, we have the best trade deal of any country in the world. Okay, those are results. We think it can be better, and we're working to make it better. But to be absolutely clear, 85% of our trade with the United States is tariff-free. Nobody else is in that position. Our average tariff is about 5.5%. That's the lowest average tariff of any country in the world. So right now we have the best, but we have real issues. Without question, we have real issues in steel, in aluminum, in forest products, in autos, potentially in pharma, copper, some other sectors. So there's these strategic sectors that the U.S. has focused on where we have issues, and as well.
With 85% of trade being tariff-free and the lowest average tariffs globally, North American commerce had flourished. Small businesses on both sides of the border benefited from this open trade relationship, creating jobs and fostering innovation. But Trump's trade war changed everything. In a series of executive orders throughout 2025, Trump systematically dismantled the de minimis exemption that had supported countless small businesses. First, he targeted China and Hong Kong in May, then expanded the assault globally on August 29, 2025. What Trump called closing a catastrophic loophole was actually the systematic destruction of entrepreneurial dreams built over decades. The numbers tell a devastating story. Before Trump's changes, the United States processed over 4 million de minimis packages daily, representing $65 billion in annual trade. These weren't massive corporate shipments, they were small packages from individual creators, artists, and makers trying to build sustainable businesses. The de minimis program had grown from 140 million shipments in 2014 to 1.36 billion in 2024, representing the democratization of international trade. The global trade landscape has fundamentally shifted.
The world is changing rapidly. The largest economy, the United States, is fundamentally reshaping all of its trading relationships. And we're moving from an age that lasted decades, an age when free trade was a motor of global economic growth, to a new age, an age of economic nationalism and mercantilism. You know, the U.S. tariff rate is now the highest it has been since the Great Depression in the 1930s. And these tariffs are being applied to all countries on nearly all goods. And the changes in U.S. policy go beyond tariffs. Countries now must, in effect, buy access to the world's largest economy through investments, through unilateral trade liberalization, and policy changes in their home markets. And all the while, the transformation of global trade is occurring against a backdrop of wider economic disruptions, of geopolitical realignment, of AI and other technological transformations, and the necessity, the imperative of a shift to a greener economy. What's going on is not a transition, it's a rupture, and its effect will be profound. Workers displaced from their jobs, supply chains that have existed for decades disrupted, companies forced to change where they find their materials and their products. And all of this is...
We're witnessing a move from decades of free trade to a new age of economic nationalism and mercantilism. The U.S. tariff rate has reached its highest level since the Great Depression, with tariffs being applied to all countries on nearly all goods. Countries must now essentially buy access to the world's largest economy through investments and policy changes. Trump's justification for ending the program was characteristically misleading. He claimed it was necessary to combat fentanyl smuggling, but experts know that most fentanyl enters the United States through the southern border, not through small packages from Etsy sellers. This was never about drug interdiction, it was about Trump's obsession with tariffs as a solution to every problem, regardless of who gets hurt in the process. Trump continues to defend these destructive policies.
We have trillions of dollars coming into our country. If we didn't have tariffs, we would be a very poor nation, and we would be taken advantage of by every other nation in the world, friend and foe. We're not going to let that happen. And we have a very, very big case in the Supreme Court. Our country has a chance to be unbelievably rich again, but it can also be unbelievably poor again. If we don't win that case, our country is going to suffer so greatly.
He insists that without tariffs, the country would be in serious trouble, claiming they bring trillions of dollars into America. But the reality is starkly different. These tariffs are functioning as a tax on American consumers and destroying the small businesses that form the backbone of our economy. The impact on small businesses has been immediate and catastrophic. Canadian sellers now face tariffs as high as 35% on handmade jewelry and crafts. For someone like Kochenek, whose products typically sell for $30 to $150, these tariffs represent a death sentence for cross-border sales. A $100 candle holder now costs American customers $135 before shipping and handling, pricing small sellers out of their primary market. The paperwork burden alone is crushing these businesses. Where sellers once simply shipped products with minimal documentation, they now need to navigate complex customs forms, provide detailed manufacturer information, and assign 10-digit HTS codes to determine tariff rates. For vintage and antique sellers, the situation is even worse. Older products may not have clearly labeled countries of manufacture, making compliance nearly impossible. Major shipping companies have responded to Trump's chaotic policy rollout by suspending services entirely. DHL, Austrian Post, and Swiss Post all announced temporary suspensions of shipments to the United States, citing insufficient information about the new customs procedures. Even Etsy itself was forced to suspend shipping label purchases for several major international carriers, leaving sellers scrambling for alternatives. Canadian officials are scrambling to respond to the crisis.
Look, Canadians should understand that we still have the best deal in the world when it comes to trade with the United States. Right now, the average tariff for Canadian goods crossing the border is about 5.5%. Around the world, it's about 16%. Now, some of our industries, steel, aluminum, auto, they're obviously being hit really hard. And the main goal of the negotiations going on right now is, one, to make sure that we preserve our existing advantage, and not to make a bad deal, but to secure that existing advantage. And it was good to see over the summer that in executive orders, the United States government also confirmed that that trade under our free trade agreement is protected. And then from that, the complex negotiations that are going on all the time.
Despite the challenges in steel, aluminum, and auto sectors being hit particularly hard, they maintain that Canada still has favorable trading conditions with an average tariff of 5.5%. But they acknowledge the real issues facing industries across the board, from forest products to pharmaceuticals and copper. The human cost of Trump's policies extends far beyond statistics. Cindy Baldassi, who runs a small jewelry business in Calgary, describes how the United States had been one of the easiest places to sell to for international entrepreneurs. Now sellers are watching their customer bases evaporate overnight. Some Etsy sellers have announced they're closing to U.S. customers entirely, businesses that represented 50% or more of their revenue streams. Trump's trade war is hitting the most vulnerable businesses hardest. Research from the National Bureau of Economic Research estimates the end of de minimis will cost U.S. consumers at least $10.9 billion annually, or $136 per family. Low-income and minority consumers will feel the biggest impact as they rely more heavily on the cheaper imported goods that small international sellers provide. The ripple effects are spreading throughout the economy. Major companies like Tapestry, which owns Coach and Kate Spade, report that tariffs will reduce profits by $160 million this year. If large corporations with teams of trade lawyers are struggling, imagine the impact on a single mother running an Etsy shop from her kitchen table. International postal services are in chaos. The policy was implemented so abruptly that shipping companies couldn't prepare adequate systems for duty collection and customs processing. This isn't just poor planning, it's a deliberate strategy of economic disruption that treats small businesses as acceptable casualties in Trump's broader trade war. Some governments are implementing emergency support measures.
Rather than unknowable uncertainty, that's when Canadian builders and innovators thrive. That's when the whole country rises with them, with higher wages, lower costs, and a stronger economy. So today, to fortify our economic strength, my colleagues and I are announcing a series of ambitious new measures to protect, build, and transform our strategic industries. These are the sectors where workers and businesses have been impacted by those tariffs and trade disruptions. And we're building on our recent initiatives to help transform Canada's steel and lumber sectors. The measures today will help workers acquire the skills and businesses to retool their production, businesses to diversify their products and markets, and, crucially, spurring more demand right here at home for Canadian businesses. The first and foremost, the foundation, is Canadian workers. And we're going to support Canadian workers so they can drive Canada's economic transformation with new skills training and help them seize the exciting high-paying careers that transformation will create. To build a strong confidence workforce that will help propel our economy forward, the government is introducing a new...
Plans include reskilling packages to train 50,000 workers, automatic enrollment of employment insurance claimants in job matching programs, and extended benefits for long tenure workers. But these measures can only do so much to offset the damage being done to established businesses and trade relationships. Some sellers are attempting to navigate the new landscape by seeking USMCA certifications that might allow their products to avoid tariffs if they can prove North American origin, but the requirements are onerous and time-consuming, according to affected sellers. Many products use materials from multiple countries, making certification nearly impossible for small operations without legal teams. The irony is profound. Trump claims to support small businesses and American workers, yet his policies are systematically destroying the international networks that allowed entrepreneurs to build sustainable enterprises. Canadian sellers who employed local workers, bought materials from regional suppliers, and contributed to their communities are being forced to abandon markets they spent years developing. Even sellers within the United States aren't immune. American Etsy sellers who import materials, leather from Mexico, fabric from Canada, components from Asia, now face dramatically higher costs. A $200 order of specialty paper from Hong Kong that once cost exactly $200 now carries landed costs of over $460 after tariffs, representing a 130% increase that makes many crafts economically unviable. The timing couldn't be worse. Small businesses are still recovering from the pandemic's economic disruption, and many had rebuilt their operations around international sales enabled by the de minimis system. Now they're facing another existential crisis, this time entirely manufactured by Trump's trade policies. Federal courts have ruled that many of Trump's tariffs, including his reciprocal tariffs, are illegal implementations of emergency powers never intended for trade policy. But while these cases work through the appeals process, real businesses are closing and real jobs are disappearing. The damage is immediate and concrete, while any legal relief remains theoretical and distant. The broader economic implications are staggering. When small businesses that employ local workers and buy from regional suppliers are forced to close, entire communities suffer. These aren't abstract trade statistics. They're neighbors, friends, and family members watching their dreams collapse under the weight of Trump's reckless economic nationalism. Trump's supporters might argue these policies protect American businesses, but the evidence suggests the opposite. By making it harder for international entrepreneurs to access American markets, these policies reduce competition and innovation while increasing costs for American consumers. The real winners are large corporations that can afford the compliance costs and legal teams needed to navigate the new system. The international response has been swift and predictable. Countries are implementing their own retaliatory measures, and the World Trade Organization is preparing dispute proceedings. But Trump has systematically undermined international trade institutions, leaving small businesses caught in the middle of escalating trade conflicts with no recourse. What makes this particularly tragic is how unnecessary it all is. The de minimis system worked efficiently for decades, facilitating legitimate trade while generating minimal administrative costs. It enabled entrepreneurship, supported small businesses, and gave consumers access to unique products from around the world. Trump destroyed the system not because it was broken, but because he needed a scapegoat for broader economic problems his other policies have failed to solve. The human stories behind these statistics are heartbreaking. Doris Koshanek built her woodworking business over 4 years, reaching nearly 1,000 sales and creating a sustainable retirement income. Now she faces the prospect of losing 90% of her customer base through no fault of her own. Her story has multiplied thousands of mez across North America and around the world. For American consumers, the impact will be felt in reduced product variety, higher prices, and fewer innovative small businesses. The vibrant ecosystem of international entrepreneurs who brought unique products to American markets is being systematically dismantled. What took decades to build is being destroyed in months. The policy represents everything wrong with Trump's approach to governance: impulsive decision-making, disregard for unintended consequences, and a willingness to sacrifice real people for political theater. Small business owners who played by the rules and built legitimate enterprises are paying the price for Trump's trade war fantasies. As shipping companies suspend services and sellers close their doors to American customers, the full scope of this disaster is still unfolding. What's clear is that Trump's tariff policies have created exactly the kind of economic chaos and small business destruction that his supporters claim to oppose. The American dream of entrepreneurship is becoming a nightmare, one tariff at a time. The lesson here is stark. When politicians prioritize ideology over economics and politics over people, real businesses suffer real consequences. Trump's trade war isn't an abstract policy debate. It's a direct attack on the small business owners and entrepreneurs who form the backbone of the North American economy. And they're fighting back the only way they can, by closing their doors to the American market that Trump has made too expensive and too complicated to serve. This isn't just about tariffs or trade policy. It's about whether we want an economy that supports entrepreneurship and small business innovation, or one that protects established interests at the expense of everyone else. Trump has made his choice clear, and small business owners across the continent are paying the price.